you ready to bend your mind?
Okay, this is the third installment of Inverted Realities, and we've got a very special guest on today, or should I say this morning in Australia, because Arthur Cristian, who's based in Sydney, I've been following him now for 3 years. Very, very interesting guy. He's got a lot to say on numerous topics. I first came across Arthur in the start of the pandemic, really. Somebody recommended me watch what he puts out, and I watched a few of his videos. And the first video I saw was actually called The Dream of Life, which opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then since then, I've just gone down various routes. And Arthur, welcome to our podcast. Also, we've got on Kail Spell, is a very good friend of mine, and she's got a number of questions she'd like to ask Arthur. But Arthur, first of all, could you just give us a little bit of an insight into where you started and where you are now?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we now live in an area called Tamagog, which is about 25 minutes inland from Kempsey, New South Wales. So we're about almost 6 hours drive north from Sydney. We're still on the coastline, just inland a bit. The work, this kind of insight work, I guess, is a lifetime's work, because some of the, I believe we bring intentions into lives, and I think that my childhood prepared me for what I'm now doing, and it was a very painful childhood with a lot of violence in the family and sexual abuse and things. I just discovered the sexual side of it. I didn't know until I was doing the Love for Life work, which started in 2005 off the back of Macquarie Bank, a large bank in Australia that organised crime involving the Supreme Court, stole a lot of money from us, including the family home. And I just sent off triggers in me. I just snapped and decided to go after these people and work out. And from that, we went through all the horrors that you would see in Hollywood movies, from assassination to kidnapping to death threats to being monitored, watched, everything. And then intimidation was one of the big ones. They love to intimidate and threaten, try to do anything to quieten down and, get you to go in directions that suit their agendas and not your own. And so anyway, all of this, with that going on and on about, I had a business background for 20 years in office automation. Before that, I had a dabbling of 4 years in Steiner education, working curative therapy as a volunteer, and grew to run groups with elderly and the severely disabled and that sort of stuff. Before that, I was dabbling in rock music and band management, entrepreneurial sort of stuff. And in amongst all that, I got exposed to permaculture back in the late 70s when I met Bill Mollison, who was the founder of it, and some of his team when I was living on a community in Victoria for about 4 years as well. This is about 77, 78 through to 81. So I've had a very interesting, I must also say I was about 14. I came home one day. This is a bit of a horror stuff, but I came home and I saw my mother's legs hanging out of the laundry window, out of the laundry door. And it was my father, when I ran down the steps, come back from school, it was my father trying to shove my mother's head down the toilet. And I lost it. And I don't know how I got him, but I grabbed him. And my little brother was telling me the story only about 6 months ago. I picked up my dad and threw him up against the wall. And I grabbed the chair and I was going to kill him. I just absolutely reached that breaking point from the history of my childhood. And so from that, my mother screamed out and said no. And I snapped out of it. And then within a couple of days, I was outside my mother's backyard, sort of crying to God, crying to something and saying, I just want to live for the truth. I just want to know what the truth was. And very, very intense about that. And I think that's where everything went from that point onwards for the rest of my life. Within, I don't know whether it's days or weeks, I ended up at a dental practice, and I was sitting at the reception area, and there was a book sitting on the table, and I heard this voice saying to me, "Take me, take me, take me, steal me, steal me, steal me." And I'm thinking, oh, okay. So it was I actually stole it, and it was a book called The Origin and Destiny of Man by Edgar Cayce. Now, it got me thinking, but the most important thing about the book was when inside the covers there was a stamp and it said Adyar, A-D-Y-A-R, Adyar Bookshop, Castlereagh Street, Sydney. So I said, oh yeah. So I started going to the Theosophical Society, which I knew nothing about, and started buying books. And at that stage, I was already working. I was always making money, even as a young kid. I was always able to make money, and I started buying books after books after books, and so many different books. These are all the early days of the beginning of what we call now the New Age and disclosure and on information from UFOs to all this sort of stuff. So I went through a lot of this, like a horse looking over the fence at green pastures, looking, reading. And then by about 1976, 77, sort of faded out. So my head was already looking into lots of things as a young boy growing up. And then I think I told you about the other things I went through, and a bit of mahikari. I got exposed to mahikari, which is this Japanese healing modality that I got through a friend that I met who was involved in one of the bands that I put together. And from there, during my business life, when I started business when did I start business? Sorry, my bearings are a bit out of whack here, but 1986, roughly. I got something happened. There was one, I think, I don't know who it was, but I got introduced to this thing called the Australian League of Rights about 1992, 1993. And they had meetings once a month in Surrey Hills, Sydney. And so I went there, and then they had this mobile bookshop called the, I've forgotten what it's called now. But anyway, and I was really fascinated by these books that were kept that were quite rare. So I started buying these books, and they were books written by British and American journalists and Australian journalists and other researchers, going right back to the 15, 16, 17, 1800s, particularly 1800s, of all types of stuff going into the occults and the esoterics and going into banking and the background behind the history of the Jews, for example. And some of these books are written by either Freemasons themselves or children of Freemasonry who got to see too much, and they wrote with warnings. So I ended up with a huge history of information about banks and how they created money out of thin air and how all this was working. And I got to meet Australian patriots, Christian patriots. Though I'm not religious, I was mixing with a lot of Christians who were very, very on the cutting edge of what was then known. And so that happened to me for about 5-6 years. I met my wife, Fiona, in 1995, 96. She was backpacking in Australia, English girl from Devon, born in Australia, in a place called Kiama. And I think her family moved back when she was about 3.5, 4. So from all of that, and then the business that carried on, and then the fraud, the tax department tried to bankrupt me. They reckoned I owed them $250,000 when I didn't, and I took them on in the Federal Magistrates Court. And I had interesting Australians through the Australian League of Rights who I've met, who have been very well-known anti-bank campaigners, some of them known overseas quite well, and dealing with the court systems and that. And from that, I met other American patriots and Canadian patriots and Kiwi patriots and other people who've been fighting and learning and unraveling the law. So I became saturated during our own trauma of the fear of losing your family home and all this other stuff happening in 2005 when we discovered the bank had switched contracts. And we started researching, discovering other Australians who had similar cases, and all of them were unlosable. So looking at all the evidence and then looking, going, my God, they're all losing. And then this is when my eyes are waking. I'm going, my God, this whole thing that I've been brought up in, told and taught, it's not what it is. So in a nutshell, I decided, and I told Fiona, I'm just going to follow what my gut instinct tells me. Nothing. I knew things weren't right out there. I knew that the world we were living in wasn't right, but I didn't comprehend it, how it really worked. So I followed my gut instinct, then then I discovered, as in hindsight, I've been using my senses and making sense of things, not relying on what people told me, not what I read or anything. I never trusted anything anymore. And then through that became scrutiny and contemplation, and everything I believed was being wiped out. In fact, I was left with nothing to believe anymore, because I got to see it all as fiction and got to see just how the brain had been done over and what was done to me. And then this became Love for Life, the website. And then from that, I got exposed to amazing people all across Earth. And this website had broken mainstream. They didn't know how to control it. They tried to censor it in the early days. So we're front runners in the vaccination, the anti-vax thing, and microwaves, radio waves, things like aspartame, backgrounds to Tibetan Buddhism and the Dalai Lama and the real history behind this. And it goes, look, it's endless, the stuff that we had. And it was a huge database, many ways of attacks to bring it down. I did all that work for free. I used to work 16-hour days, just kept putting everything overcome. I just put it out there and it would mix in with our work, hoping that our work, the analogy of that would be if you can imagine a bee coming into a garden and comes to a flower, which is a browser. Someone who's browsing on the internet would come to a particular web page, and the bee in this analogy would be noted, oh my God, there's more flowers. It starts looking around. And so I was intending to see if I can attract other people, and some of them I discover, because at that stage we were very traumatized and still very frightened and about our security and everything being stolen. And in today's value, it's like 6 million. Back then it would have been about 1.5, 2 million, I think, all up. So everything I worked for was just, and being in the court system, firstly facing the tax department and the whole process. And they didn't bankrupt me. They didn't have any success in any of it. I learned about the name. I got to work out what the name was, how the name worked. And so I applied that, even that back then in 2006. And during that time, I decided to drop the name, and I talked to Fiona about it, and we agreed that she'd stay in with all the contracts and I would drop everything and drop out. And I didn't write to anybody, didn't ask anybody about anything, and moved ahead, and I became nothing in their world. They could no longer see the person anymore because there wasn't one there being represented in their world. So, and briefly, if any of your viewers don't comprehend this, the person is the ID, the identification of the name that we represent in their matrix, in their fiction world, make believe. And while we use the name and we sign for it and write behalf, we create everything from it. We're the ones creating everything. We're the creators of all of it. And we bind ourselves to the laws and the rulings of all their statutes, that Roman civil law that works within it. And you can see, like with the Corona thing a few years ago, how people were just complying and acquiescing, and the fear porn and everything else that was coming with it, is because we'd agreed to all this. We agreed to everything. And we don't comprehend how it works. And a lot of us don't even go that far. They don't want to know. So I guess I'm one of the real radicals in their world. They would see me as a terror now, that I was capable of going that deep that I came out the other end with a clear head, because we don't drink or smoke or take drugs. We're clean living. They're still traumatized, still stressed, get fat, get overweight, all that kind of stuff. Still don't eat right. I mean, they eat well, but don't eat right. Anyway, I don't know what else to say. I guess I have a lot to share. To share about the insights of this stuff and how this matrix really does work and what's really going on from my perspective.
That's one of the big things that Carly, I'll bring you in on this as well, because this is your field as well. The actual fiction that we're all in, and how we've all been deceived in terms of, like you say, the name. And we are creating this ourselves because we're fully in the system. Obviously, Arthur, you've managed to take your name out of the system. Obviously, Fiona's still in there. Carly, what would you like to say to Arthur on this?
Yeah, so it was, I always say you don't learn anything whilst you're talking, and I can talk. So it was really nice just to let Arthur roll there, because there's just to hear your story. Wow, I was getting like goosebumps at some point. And I think the thing is with it, leaving the law aside for a second, just on that kind of level of, experiencing that trauma, when you were, a young child. It's funny. One of the ladies who comes on the Inverted Realities pod sometimes, Angie Hinks, she does some amazing writings about third-party narratives and dream states and constructs and how we're fed all these fictions. And she has this idea that Generation X, they're kind of sandwiched in the middle between the baby boomers and the millennials, and there's this kind of hourglass that represents time, and we're holding back these two timelines, and that Generation X basically are these like Marines. There's we kind of had, it's almost like we came down, and I'm really getting into my astrology, and I was big bang into my, and still am, my astrotheology, but it's just so fascinating that, you know, we come down and we kind of, perhaps these traumas are programmed for us to wait in that sense, you know, whether that's true or whether it's not, who knows. But certainly that kind of trauma. I know I had trauma from, teen, being a young child. It helps you see, doesn't it? You know, as terrible as it is, you wake up fairly quickly, I think, to kind of the code of things, or it certainly sets you on that path. So that was just kind of my experience. But yeah, but the law, yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for 3 years. I've got a law degree, you know, LLB honors. But as I always say, they don't teach you at university they have to teach you to understand the system, you know, it wants its minions. Whereas I was similar to you, Arthur. I did, you know, I was a metal music promoter. I was doing all that kind of stuff, you know, got my degree, saw through that system and thought, I don't want any part of that. Went going having some fun. But it was only when the first lockdown hit, and I've been awake 20 odd years, I thought, well, this is it. They're going for it. But again, you know, the system that I've realized, you know, people are still out there fighting this system, and the awareness of the system is key for me, this kind of conscious awareness of what it is. But if we're fighting it, it's looshing us, you know, we're feeding it, and it is all construct. You know, the legal fiction is a fiction, and people talk about the common law, but the common law, you know, that's a fiction. There's only 12 presumptions of law. It's literally a dream within a dream, and the more it needs our energy. I was watching your interview, The Cult of Hoops. And this system, that's what it does. It's, I call it the Rubik's Cube puzzle that it'll just present to you. I mean, there's certain things that underpin it where we can use back doors, because those back doors exist in the system because they use them. But generally, it's just they get you staring at a Rubik's Cube of a puzzle, and you constantly jumping through the hoops. It's David Bowie in the labyrinth, as I always say. You know, he's got us spinning around the labyrinth, falling down the oubliettes, crossing the bog of eternal stench, and really, in the end, the answer is you have no power over me, because we're constantly thinking that we're this piece of paper. And as I say, no piece of paper can tell you who you are. And you know, that's what, you know, we know it's language, we know it's that serpent tongue, we know it's trickery, the dog line, all of it. And the more you kind of come out of one construct, and clues in the title, there's another, and there's another, and there's another, and it's this like, whoa. And for me, it's been like this, you know, these last 3 years since the pandemic. You know, just when you think you're camped in the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, and let's decode that, wow, you know, the more you just see through these third-party narratives that are presented to us, and you talked about this beautifully in the video that I watched. Well, then we're giving energy to their stories, and we know that people respond to stories, and stories is what we project, and that consciousness. So they control the narrative, they control this, because we're all staring at it. And like you say, it's time to kind of look away, and we are the creators. You know, they can't create. They need us as dead fictional entities, because they can't create anything. They need us. We don't need them. And when we wake up to that, then I think we're actually moving somewhere. Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, it's good, Kail. It's very challenging in the fact that the layers will never stop while we continue accepting the languages that we're talking that they gave us. The alphabets themselves is where the matrix is formed. The definitions that we have become attached to, that provided that perception of reality that we've looked at, is not our dreams. It's not our life. They're borrowed. So until we can deconstruct even the languages, all alphabet languages, every single one of them are all theirs. They're all Freemasonic in origin. They're not natural. They don't come from nature. That's just what I've come to see from the journey that we're on, and why we're on the land, and why we're committed to creating what we call the kingdom without the G, the KIN, the Kim, and not the dumb. We're not dumb, not in free dumb. We're not dumb. We're not free dumb. We're kin, and so basically we are brothers and sisters of life. So the system is fiction. everything of the system is fiction. There's nothing of it that isn't fiction. This includes all the esoterics. This includes astrology, numerology. Everything defined to us is fiction. The definitions are not the experiences that we have. So there's got to know the difference between what we're sensing, because what we're sensing is the direct experiences of reality we're already having. But the definitions that come in that we place or superimpose over what we are sensing or feeling is where the confusion is. And there's your black and white squares in Freemasonry and the gray that we get trapped in, and how they've kept us in, how we've kept ourselves in the creation of that all this time and don't know how to break away from it all. So the white in Freemasonry and the black and white, if you look at that, and then you can look at the picture like the obelisks and all those symbols they use inside I call them brilliant art forms. They are truly brilliant art forms, because you can take your head off to these people, how clever they really are, and how stupid we've been, to not recognize it in plain sight, staring at us all this time. But the white is reality, is nature, it's us, it's life. So when we talk about consciousness, it's life. When we talk about God, it's life. When we talk about everything of the truth, it's life. Anything divine, it's life. It's just life. We're life. And that life is eternal, because all life comes out of life. It's never had a beginning or end. You can never get outside life, and we can't get inside somewhere away from life either. Life is life, and that's what we are. So the definitions separate us through illusion, through imagining things. So if I say to you, oh, that's God, we can, and have that projected to us regularly through those who've been indoctrinated, we can accept something apart from life and see ourselves being apart from something else of life, when all that time we are part of it and always been part of it, and it's never been a separation. That's the illusion. So the confusion comes because in being given the name and having the identity that we associate with, we form the illusion that is the matrix, that there's Arthur, and then there's Kylie, and then there's Paul, and then there's this and that, and we're all somehow individuals. We're individuals, and we're not. So to me, we got to get past the words now, get past all the languages of the words. It's life. So when I'm talking about creation, it's life. Now, what is this life? It's very simple. As children being brought up by nature, the senses, touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see, we have is the life we are creating as we are exposed to the life all around us that we're part of. So that life, we can, in the system, we call it thoughts, we call it dreams, we call it definitions, explanations. It's just life. And when we are allowed to form our life with no one telling us how to think and feel about anything, we're creating our soul, what they call the soul. It's basically just the uniqueness of who we really are. If you can imagine grabbing a pool of water and put it in your hand, and you're holding water in your hand, just imagine every drop of water in there is a life. Your life, my life, Paul's life, everyone's life. And yet there's a wholeness to it. And there's uniqueness and originality happening there. It's already happening. And that's what it is. It's life. And it's eternal. It has no beginning or end. And so when we think about afterlife, we talk like there's afterlife. Well, there is no afterlife. It's life. Life. We don't die. But we can shut ourselves down and make ourselves asleep, and we don't have any connection anymore. We can actually dream ourselves to a death, to an eternal death, through our imagining of an afterlife, or we believe that there is nothing after life, or whatever concepts we fall into that put us asleep, and we're in the scripts, in the storytelling, spinning with these scripts. And we call that the E-go. I call that E-go, ego, or E-motion. Now, I'll try to explain this quickly. E means ecclesiastical. In the alphabet languages, every letter has a meaning. They don't teach you the meaning of the letters in the language. There's a history behind how I come to learn this, but it's not really important today. But E means high priest of the occults, ecclesiastical. Someone whose intention to shape what we are perceiving. They want to come inside our head and become part of our dreaming, part of our thinking. So they say, like someone says to me, that's yellow, and that's a daffodil. The life form I'm observing never told me it was yellow or was a daffodil, but someone else has come inside my head and formed the definition. Now, behind all this is intention. Someone's intended to tell me or control me or have power over my perception of my life. Yeah. So the definition is where the matrix, where there's gray and white, where the white and gray operates, and the confusion is. And so we're inside a language of definitions and definitions. So I'm sort of trying to keep as brief, as simple as I can here. Until we wake up and get out of this one, we won't even know who we are.
They want us like a dream within a dream. It's like that Edgar Allan Poe thing, isn't it? And I suppose the further they can keep us into that dream, a construct within a construct within a construct, then we're getting further away from kind of our original nature or existence. Yeah, exactly. I suppose that's the right word.
We get controlled and manipulated while we're asleep, busy in the distractions, like a child who's exposed to Superman. From sitting on the parent's lap and watching the pictures as mum or dad are reading the story, and the child is forming the imagining of everything, because the Matrix is all about imagining. It's all fantasy. We can easily project the script of Superman and see us project our life into the image of Superman to become it. And there we are as the child wearing the Superman costume, talking the scripts of Superman and acting out Metropolis in the family home, because we've moved the furniture around. We've made all these adjustments around in this fantasy. And then in amongst all the good guys and bad guys in our fantasy, we come across kryptonite, and then we are paralyzed. Well, that's coronavirus for you.
Yeah.
And it's this duality reality, isn't it, that's being played out all the time in every movie, and every, they all follow a certain kind of narrative and script, and the movie that we're in now, and we're kind of projecting it to that degree, I suppose.
Exactly.
Light is Lucifer, Yaldabaoth, Satan, but Jesus, the son of, is the sun worship. That when you link them all, they're all the same thing. They're just the opposite of the other, and they're all like the protagonist to the and it just creates this script. Like scripture is your script. They call it the greatest story ever told. So people say, oh, it's playing out that way. Well, it will, because that's what we're projecting.
Well, let's go further.
Yeah.
Exactly. Behind the script, for example, you go behind Christianity, peel it back like an onion ring, is the system.
Yeah.
Go back to the onion core, it's the system. Behind Buddhism, the system. Behind atheism, the system. Behind Allah, the system. Behind everything from system side is the system. What is the system? A man's intention to control you. That's all it is. Now, it can be a collective. Well,
sorry, Arthur, I was just jumping in there. Sorry, Arthur, just jump in there and say this. We're talking about the system. So if we look and think about the tribesmen of Africa that live on the land, that have never come across any of the imaginings from the system, because they have their own way of life. And I think it was you that put it as these ships that came over the ocean, the UFOs, the unidentified floating objects, came with their books, and then they obviously took on their culture, their language, and it was drummed into them. And like I say as well, even when we have this pandemic, where in the native tribes' land did this exist? It didn't exist, because they weren't a part of it, because it wasn't a part of their life. But somehow they've gotten into the Western world, and this is where we're at now.
It's storytelling within storytelling, and within storytelling, all of Freemasonry, because Freemasonry is in the occults, and the occult, OC capital CULT, occult, is a sameness. So when a man's intention to get inside your head, they want you to be in their image. So you have a duality with them. You form it's like being polarized inside another man's dream. So you've forgotten your dream because you don't know, you're not living your dream. So you could easily be, as children, be exposed to storytelling through wonderment, amazement, enchantments, entertainment, and we can get sucked into these scripts. And while we are recalling the images of the scripts, we become bound to the bigger picture of the man's intention who put us into that script. Because what is the intention but power and control of our life? So when you peel back the Church of England or the Roman Catholic Church or the Judaism or whatever you want to peel it back, you're in the system of power and control of those, and you're inside the realms of their law and their rules and regulation, which are all definitions, all made up out of thin air, all designed to maintain power control over your life. So basically, on the foreground, on the very foreground, it's all entertainment. We're entertainment, mente, the taming of the mind, the brain of man. So we've entered into a script and we've become spellbound. So the scripts is a part of the racket, the scam. The real racket, the biggest of the lot, is the system itself that we are trapped in while we're being entertained with Christianity or Mohammedanism or atheism or in this day, disclosure, Corona. They're all forms of scripts that keep you sucked in, while the system that they control can be moved wherever they want to move it and mold it, and you go with it because you're part of it. You're bound to it, but you're not conscious of it. And this all goes back to the difference between fiction and life, between what we're talking about, what's reality and what isn't, and what's happened to all of us, how we've ended up like this. So until we can come outside of the languages and depart from the scripts of everything that's spinning in our heads that defined everything that we've accepted. Oh, that's yellow, that's this, and that's that, and that's blue, and it's that, and it's tall, and it's fat, and it's thin, and that's a redwood, and that's that, and that's it. Just look, the best way to explain it is that we don't need to teach a puppy dog what it is to be a dog so he can become a dog. It's already built in with everything. Now, all of life is like this. All of nature, creation is like this. We don't have to teach anything about anything. It's already built in. It's already happening. So it's the same with us. We don't need to have to be taught about who we are, what we are, or anything. But the definitions will shut us down and confuse us as we entertain the scripts.
Again, it's construct, it's boxing you in. I know you talked about the UCC, and for people that don't know, that's the Uniform Commercial Code that governs all commerce on the planet, because that's what we're in now. And you talked about this on the hoops. It's kind of like the coffin to confine. They're constantly putting us in boxes, money boxes. Everything's a box. Everything, all this Saturn worship that they do, that all these symbols and codes, all their language is just to keep confining us all the time. And for me, it was always looking at this Rubik's cube, another box, another puzzle, another thing. And even the language keeps you adverb, verb, but you're talking in the past or you're talking in the future. You're never in now time. You're never just being. And I think there's that old proverb when I was listening to you talk then, it was an old Indian proverb, is it like the Indian 10 Indian men and an elephant, blind Indian men, and they're all feeling an elephant, aren't they? And they're all explaining, well, it's wrinkly, it's grey, well, they won't say it's grey, it feels rough, it feels like a stone, and they're all explaining it in a completely different way, because that is sensory, and the constructs of, if they weren't blind, they just explain it, well, that's an elephant, but it's not that. That's explaining that very badly, but
because like if two of us are standing together looking at a life form, the experience that you are having through your senses, I will never experience that, no matter what you try and explain to me.
Yes, exactly.
So and vice versa, so somewhere along the line, someone tried that, and this began the beginning of the evolution of the ego and the emotion and the fall from the grace and well, basically the fall from sacredness into desecration, and and from that power and control trips and everything, because we think that our view is the right one. We're going to explain and get someone inside the box of that perception, and then keep them in there. Right. Yeah. So that's behind Freemasonry. It's behind Judaism. It's behind Christianity. It's behind. So we are all kidnapped as little kids.
It loves labels,
Kidnapped.
doesn't it? Everyone
Yeah,
wants
we're
to.
all labeled.
You constantly define and labeling ourselves as things,
Yeah.
because that's what the system
Yeah.
likes. It likes to confine, likes to box
Exactly.
us in. But I know in scripture it said, "Let the one with understanding reckon the number of the beast, and the number is the number of man, 666, and 6 is 42. 4 plus 2 is 6, and it's matter." But reckon comes from the Greek word to calculate or to solve. And again, like, people are reading scripture literally, and they're going along with its literal narrative, when really it's a code for us to decode that, not this crude matter are we, and that we are spirit. And that, I watched a really good YouTube video that was on at Drake, Michigan, with a guy called Lawrence, and one of his theories is that we are the fallen angels. We are this light that we've forgotten, and we're having this kind of, as Paul would say, we're in our meat suits, and we think this is real. This has to be real, right? And that's our fall from grace, really, and it's that remembering or reconnecting or resourcing, as I say,
and this is the nightmare.
And study is resourcing ourselves back to our true essence and being.
That journey, what you're saying there, Kail, the return back to Eden, to paradise, is a nightmare for most of us. Why? Because we have to look at everything we are imagining as still part of our life and realizing it ain't. Now, we're talking about the computer technology right now, with the mobile phones, the electricity, the concrete, the plastic, the steel. Everything is all fiction. We are such hypocrites, and we are also deeply compromised. But we got to, at least, it doesn't mean we can't still make the changes and pass the baton on to the next generation to progress back out of this nightmare that we're all in. So while people are running, like you said, the word spirit before, it's life. I look at it, it's just spirit, it's just life. It's just life. It's all, everything is, the truth is just life. You're life.
Yeah, because
why would you want to come?
Opposite is death, isn't it? Everything's dead in their system.
Anti-life, which is
like,
exactly. Well, that's what. See, we went from overt slavery, where everyone knew who would, tribes would come invade other tribe, and that was all done through inculcation as well, and indoctrination, and being taught with race cultures and whatever, people slandering and coming up with fictions in our heads, and they're an enemy, we must go in and invade, and we are susceptible to being manipulated in many different ways like that. So we went from overt slavery, where we knew who was in power because they invaded our ancestors or our families, and we are their slaves, and then there'd be uprisings. And the uprisings would never stop, because everybody naturally would go back to want to have life. They want life meaning freedom. Freedom is your life, and and you're having your spirit, having your conscience. Life, it's life. Why should it be subjugated under someone else's life? So that uprising would happen. So and so eventually, too many losses on all sides would be the statistics that made these occultists think there has to be another way to deal with this shit. So they came through a covert method, and doing it through all this what we're already talking about now, this subliminal method of controlling us through language and through definitions and getting us lost inside the matrix. And in doing so, it was the greatest devastation to life, because we have to do immense destruction to life to construct the fiction and live in the fiction, in the box of the fiction, what we call cities and suburbs and technologies and engineering and everything else, and keep it and then maintain it. Because it's all dead, like it's all dead corpse, right? The dead corpse can't do anything. I say to people, when you're walking down a road and you see a dead body, that corpse is dead. Well, that's the corporations. That's all the legalese. It's everything of the law and of the government, all the bills and statutes, and all this is rooted in Roman civil law. And it's old methods of running this covert system, right? So if you, for example, the child of performing Superman can't do nothing. You can never visit Superman. Like you can't visit Santa Claus or Tooth Fairy or Easter Bunny. Well, we can't even visit your name. I can never talk to your name. I can't even visit anyone's address. I can't talk to the address. It doesn't exist. Well, right? But what's behind it is life.
Yeah, it's the beast, isn't it? They say, if
We are the
the
beast.
Vatican is the beast, then the language is its system, and we're literally just casting these spells on each other, and they're using symbolism, etc. But again, it's all construct, and we stir at it, and people they hijack these symbols. Energy is just energy, but they'll make it, oh, don't look at this, it's all really dark. But really, actually, these symbols occur naturally in sacred geometry, and again, we've just kind of, I mean, I love the puzzle of it, but again, I was like you, Arthur. I think I utilize what I know about the law, about the system, about being awake 20 odd years. I went with Ike down. Do you know the lizard, the heavy, the lead to gold, the alchemy, all these studies. But and especially these last 3 years, 4 years, I just went straight back to the law, and it was my, I'm about debt. I help people, with discharge debts and things like that, because when you understand banking, then I mean, the fact that government means mind control, from the Latin governare, to control the
Governmental,
men's the
yeah,
mind. You think that would be
yeah.
enough for people if you explain how banking works, but that is that kind of, complete dissonance and programming and mind control that's, in effect on people. But yeah, I mean, the last 3 years I was doing 15-hour days, 16-hour days, and then I kind of burnt out really. And then in the end, I was chuckling to myself after a long dark night of the soul, because I was just like, I'm doing the same thing. I'm like literally staring at it. Take the truth movement or the freedom movement. It's just another occult construct that they're giving us to keep us in another layer of dreaming again. And then I realized it, and I like I say, I chuckled at myself, and I try the best I can to kind of be of the world, not in it. I tend to have one foot in. I paddle two canoes, but the goal for me is literally, yeah, we are nameless, really. We just are, isn't it? It's in all kind of
Well,
ancient
I can already
texts.
smell you. We can smell each other. We can hear each other. We don't need
Yeah.
names. We don't need. It's because see, this gets into again to the other side of the occults, where they work with doubt, uncertainty, distrust, fear, suspicion, and this comes out of ritual sacrifice and how they encoded all this in the languages that we're talking. So again, the definition. So going back to the analogy of Superman. We're talking about dead corpse fictions, right? Fictions that can't do anything for itself because there's no life there. So we have to act as the life of the fiction. So when we talk about esoterics and occults, we're acting as the life of the fictions behind esoterics and occults. This includes all forms of alchemy. This includes all sacred geometry. Look, it's very simple. If it can't stand before you and commune with you directly, and so you can sense it, then you know that you're doing all the performing for it. So that's how you untangle from the scripts, when you can realize, oh, hang on, I'm acting on behalf of this. So that's the scrutiny. This is what I was saying in the beginning of the video, that I used a lot of scrutiny and contemplation. I realized I had no belief left. I had nothing, because I realized all of it was fiction. So when you actually just simply say, oh, is this true? Do I have to act on behalf of that concept, that construct, that definition? If that's the case, and
Right.
that definition does not exist before me as a life, then I know I'm in the matrix, trapped in the box of that concept,
Yeah, yeah,
conceptualized,
yeah.
so if you follow, so this is how it becomes very painful, because we have to extricate. Look, for me, I just talk for the vessel, this man, I have no astrology, I have no numerology, I have no sacred geometry, because it's all bullshit. None of it
Yeah, yeah,
exists.
yeah.
What's happening is happening, and the life of what's happening carries the spirit of each life form, and that spirit is the intention. There's an intention for every life form. So, and it only operates in the here and now, and the here and now is eternal. So the more that we detune from the matrix and retune back to the senses, where we can sense the life form, the information of the life form comes to us and communes with us, and we don't have to act anymore on behalf of it. We don't have to perform in our head, oh, it's a daffodil and it's yellow and it's this, and go through the science scripts and all that sort of stuff. Because every instant, the life form's changing too, just like we're changing. Just because
Yeah.
we're
It's that
changing, we forget that everything else around us is changing. So you can never
it's like it's separated. It's like we're separating yourself from the legal fiction, isn't it? It's a similar kind of thing,
oh,
but it's like macrocosm to the microcosm. Even when you're talking there, I'm right, because the matrix, the matter, the Lucifer, the light, the prism plane, ET, whatever
yeah,
that construct is, you know, we're kind of projecting and creating it. But like, I'm guessing what you're saying is, I'm just trying to work this out off the top of my head, but you know, the kingdom that you're doing, as I would say, kind of like back to the true nature of things, the, you know, the whatever
village life, tribal
reality is.
life.
But I suppose one thing that I always think of it, like the Matrix is something that's, you know, been placed on top of what truly is, and we give that energy. That's where perhaps, you know, new, because I love, you know, I'm really getting into my numerology and my gematria and all this, and it does, you can, you know, you can decode that matrix because it is built on this code. But underneath that, or underlying it, if I'm getting this right in my head, like that's where it's like almost like it's been layered and placed on top of the true kind of creation,
And
really.
it'll
And
keep
we
you in it.
feel,
You'll be
I
kept
think,
in it. You'll never be able, while you're in it, you'll always be in it
yeah,
and be manipulated. All the time you're in it, you'll be manipulated, because the thing is that, let's just go back to life. Life at its root is intention. There's an intention for the existence of every living thing. Even the progeny of every life form that creates its siblings, or whatever you want to call it, there's an intention. So, for example, when we're looking at a life form together, and then we see the same, what we call the same life form, they're not the same. There's a uniqueness, like I said about the drops of water. There's a uniqueness, there's a sacredness to each life form. So and that's what we talk about, the good heart and the virtues of the good heart, which is not, look, we have to use concepts and constructs to explain. So we're using the system to explain the system so we can learn how to recognize and get out of it. But we've got to watch we don't get trapped by attachment to the concepts of, even when I use words like the good heart, and the good, and all the virtues of the good heart, like kindness and compassion and empathy and respect, and all these things come into play. So we have just forgotten our true nature of life itself, our real life. So when we wake up, have absolute reverence for life. When we really, really, truly wake up, it's a nightmare at first, because we go, oh my God, I am Godzilla in the middle of, excuse my effing hell, and I'm the beast of everything, destroying it. Because to have the Superman costume and to enter into the costume to perform it, the fiction of that role play, of that script, I need to devastate life. Now, a car, a machine, a computer, all the technology and the concepts and concept that forms the imagery that we associate with the occults of esoterics and whether it's astrology, numerology, all these images were manufactured from life. Now, what is life? But life forms. So we go to these life forms and we destroy them. They never gave us their permission to kill and eat them and destroy them and turn them into fictions, so we can run around and play with the props of the script that we're inside. We're on stage inside the scripts and staging out these scripts of whatever is in our head that we're playing out. Even if we place a good heart when we think we're all doing the right thing, we're still Godzilla. We're still a monster, because we are still the consumers of life. We're still materialists. We have to destroy and destroy and destroy. And we're relying on all the blue collars and white collars who have to be the cogs and the wheels of the machine that has to destroy, so we can have all the good bits of the system that we want to play out the roles we play in system life. But while we do that, we're asleep to all the bad, because all the bad comes with all the good at the same time. And all that bad is all the harm that we're unconscious of supporting. So I've got a mouse. You know how much destruction to life? The mouse mat. I could pick up the keyboard. I could pick up this jar, you know, this plastic bottle. Do you realize just how much the Godzilla in us is, and how much we're supporting it? And it's daunting, because how else do we live? We don't know how else to live. We've practiced 24/7 living like this, living in, it's like we're in a sandpit of fiction, and every grain of sand is a fiction, and we've been molded to live in the fiction of things, of material things, and we don't know how else to be, because our brain is so addled by the language of fiction that associates with fiction. So when we talk about I'm waking up, are we really waking up? Because we're just going from one modality of fiction to another. But now we're anesthetized and we don't see. Talking about the modern waking up, there's no waking up going on, because everybody's still a consumer of life. We're still destroying life. instead of
And it's all in the
respecting.
language, isn't it? We're saying it all the time. We're telling ourselves. It's hilarious, really.
know.
It's like we're literally like blah, blah, blah. I think
Exactly.
in the Apocrypha of John, in that text, they call the Matrix the ignorant darkness. And people are just ignorant to, we're being told that it's there all the time, but we just, for those that have eyes to see, really. It's amazing, really, isn't it?
It's
It's just like,
spiraling.
wow.